The morning sun filtered through the wooden-framed windows, casting soft shadows on the well-worn rug where Elena Carter had spent most of her childhood sprawled out with books. The small house in Asheville, North Carolina, exhaled a quiet stillness that only came with goodbyes. In her bedroom mirror, Elena fastened the final button on her cream floral dress, the only piece she'd chosen from her modest wardrobe to bring along. A small suitcase sat neatly by the front door. Inside were unfinished manuscripts, her worn leather notebook, and a few unsent letters written in her careful, slanted handwriting. Elena placed her hand over her chest where her heart was thudding. Not from fear exactly, but from something softer and sharper all at once. The sense that life was about to turn a page. "You keep staring at that mirror like it owes you answers," came Aunt May's voice from the doorway, wrapped in the comforting scent of cinnamon biscuits and quiet wisdom. Elena turned, her eyes shimmering with a mix of nerves and light. "Do I look like I'm trying too hard to be someone I'm not?" Aunt May stepped in, slow but steady, her lined hand resting gently on Elena's shoulder. "You look like yourself, baby. Just the version of you that's brave enough to step into the big wide world. You don't need to fit in. Just be real." Outside, the distant sound of a train whistle reminded Elena that time wasn't something you could reason with. She took a deep breath and glanced at the framed photo on the wall. Her parents, lost in a car accident when she was just 10. Since then, Aunt May had raised her with books, herbal tea, and the belief that beautiful things still existed in a messy world. "I'm scared," Elena whispered, eyes drifting to the red maple swaying in the early wind. "Then be scared," Aunt May replied with a quiet smile. "As long as you keep moving forward, courage ain't the absence of fear. It's walking through it with your heart still beating loud." Elena let out a breathy laugh, but a tear slipped down her cheek anyway. She wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because she knew she was leaving behind the only arms that had ever felt like home. Her train to Chicago departed at 9:00 a.m. Miami. Before leaving, she left a note on the kitchen table. "I won't lose myself. If I'm lucky, I'll find even more of me." As the train wheels rolled along the tracks, she leaned her forehead against the window, watching the scenery blur by. Asheville faded into morning mist, but inside her, everything remained sharp and steady, especially Aunt May's final words before their tight goodbye hug. "Don't let the world talk you out of writing with your heart." Chicago was a different song entirely. Fast, loud, and utterly unforgiving. Elena Carter stood motionless on the sidewalk, her small suitcase by her ankle like an anchor in a flood of moving bodies. She had stepped off the train less than an hour ago and was now attempting to navigate her phone's map, which spun in every direction despite her standing perfectly still. The building she was looking for, Hale Tower, rose before her like a massive slab of mirrored ice, catching the morning light and slicing it clean. Every time the revolving door turned, people poured in and disappeared, as if they were born to belong here. Elena swallowed hard. Aunt May had always said, if you stay true to yourself, anywhere can be home. But here, among gray suits, designer handbags, and the rhythm of determined footsteps, she felt like a handwritten note in a world of auto-replies. She stepped into the vast lobby, the soles of her flats tapping quietly against the marble. A security guard glanced at her with polite impatience. "I'm here for Crescent House Publishing," she said, voice soft. "Summer mentorship program." He nodded toward the express elevators. 42nd floor, use the far right." Elena entered an empty elevator and tightened her grip on her tote. Mirrors reflected her in endless loops, a simple dress, a light scarf, and a face trying not to look overwhelmed. She adjusted her pearl earrings, her mother's last gift. Just before the doors closed completely, a man entered, swiftly, precisely, as though every second he spent was measured in market value. He wore a storm gray suit tailored to perfection, a diagonally cut silver tie, and a scent of expensive sandalwood. And something more. Control. He pressed the button for the 48th floor without speaking, but Elena recognized him immediately. Julian Hale, venture capitalist, owner of the building, and a figure she had read about in tech publishing interviews. The air in the elevator shifted. Julian glanced briefly at her, just long enough not to be rude, yet long enough to make her pulse stutter. Suddenly, clunk, the elevator jolted, then stopped. The lights flickered and shifted to red emergency mode. Elena froze. Julian tapped buttons. Nothing. He pulled out his phone. No signal. A terse, restrained sigh. "Well, this is inconvenient," he said. Elena laughed before she could stop herself. A genuine bubbling sound that echoed in the closed space like unexpected music. "Sorry," she said quickly. "That might be the biggest understatement I've ever heard." He turned fully to face her. His eyes landed on her earrings, then her face. Something flickered. Surprise, curiosity, maybe even something softer. "You're new," he stated. "That obvious?" Elena smoothed her dress. "First day. Crescent House." "You're early. Aunt May says being early is on time. Being on time is already late." Something close to a smile ghosted across his lips. Not quite, but enough to alter his features. "I'm Elena," she added, because silence was starting to feel heavy. He hesitated, a rare thing. "Julian," he replied, without a last name. Didn't need to. A soft voice came through the elevator intercom. "Could take 15 to 20 minutes. Please remain calm." Elena sighed and sank slowly to the floor. Julian blinked, startled. "You can stand if you want," she smiled, "but these new shoes weren't made for elevator limbo." He studied her for a long beat, then lowered himself beside her. Not too close, but not far. The warm scent of his cologne filled the space. "Why Crescent House?" he asked. She was about to recite her rehearsed answer about career goals and literary passion, but his eyes, lit only by the red glow, seemed to ask for something real. "Because they're the only ones who didn't just see my zip code," she said, "and because they still believe in stories, not just statistics." Silence, but this time it felt warm, like the beginning of something unfolding quietly. When the elevator finally jerked back to life, they both rose to their feet, slightly flustered. Elena tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Julian adjusted his tie with quiet precision. Neither spoke, but it wasn't necessary. The look he gave her as she stepped off on the 42nd floor. There was something unsaid in it, a note hanging in the air like a melody that hadn't yet resolved. Elena spent the rest of the morning getting acquainted with the publishing floor. Crescent House wasn't flashy, but it felt creative, full of abstract art, antique shelves, and the subtle hum of keyboards tapping in quiet syncopation. Her workspace was a small desk tucked near the T corner. Less than an hour into her orientation, a front desk staffer appeared at her elbow. "Elena Carter, you're wanted upstairs." She blinked. "Upstairs?" "Julian Hale's office, 48th floor, now." Her heartbeat spiked. Was this a mistake, or just an elaborate thank you for keeping calm in a stalled elevator? The elevator ride up was silent but loud inside her chest. She checked her reflection, reminded herself to breathe. When the doors opened, a woman with sharp eyes and auburn hair greeted her. "He's in a meeting," she said without smiling. "But he asked me to bring you into the waiting room." Elena sat down on a sleek black leather chair. The room was so quiet she could hear the second hand on the clock ticking. Then Julian entered. No jacket, just a crisp white shirt with rolled-up sleeves. Something about him shifted the energy in the room, not with dominance, but presence. "Thank you for this morning," he said simply. Elena nodded, still unsure this was real. "Did you know I'm funding an experimental branch at Crescent House?" he asked. She shook her head. "We're building a publishing platform for new voices, outside traditional gatekeeping." His gaze didn't waver. "I need someone to assist with research, content feedback, organization. It's not a typical intern role, but I think you're the right person." Elena blinked. "Why me?" "Because you weren't afraid to tell the truth," he said. "Because you laughed in an elevator. Because you see people, not positions." Silence settled again. "Elena," he said slowly, "I need someone with intuition, heart, and sharp thinking. I don't usually trust emotion, but this morning, I trusted how you made me feel." She met his gaze. It was true, he didn't know how to express feelings. Just like she wasn't used to being chosen simply for being herself. I'm not sure I'm qualified, she whispered. The rest can be learned, he replied. She nodded slightly. But I should warn you, she said. I sing when I work. Not loud, but it happens, and I make tea the way my aunt taught me, with cinnamon and a pinch of salt. Sometimes I disappear into a book during lunch and lose track of time. This time, Julian actually smiled. Not fully, but his eyes softened. Consider me warned. She stood, hand tightening on her bag strap. When do I start? Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Elena nodded. You're about to have the strangest tea of your life. And she walked out of his office with her heart pounding, not because of the power, but because of something far more rare, a real opportunity from a man who never believed in feelings until he met her. She arrived at exactly 6:50 a.m. The 48th floor lobby was still asleep, lights dimmed low, the silence thick like early morning fog. Elena stood outside Julian Hale's office, holding a cup of her signature tea, cinnamon, a pinch of salt, and honey, Aunt May's recipe. She double-checked his schedule on the tablet left for her the day before. Not a single mistake. The door opened just as the minute hand clicked to 12. Julian stepped out, black shirt, tie loose in his hand, hair slightly mussed, like he'd trimmed sleep to show up for her. You're early, he said. I believe in taking a breath before the world starts. He nodded, eyes briefly landing on the cup of tea resting on her desk. This? Mystery blend. Cinnamon, honey, a touch of salt. My aunt says it starts your day with kindness. Julian took the cup, sipped. He paused, not because it was bad, but because it was unexpected. Not terrible, he said, placing it down. Comforting, like its maker. Elena didn't reply, but her eyes widened slightly. The first compliment from Julian Hale that didn't come wrapped in a command. They worked side by side for hours, day after day. Elena organized schedules, edited manuscripts, researched the indie publishing world. Occasionally, just occasionally, she made Julian laugh with her sincere, unexpectedly clever remarks. He worked as though time were currency, none to waste. But Elena, somehow, slipped into the unnoticed spaces of his routine. Like the way she brought tea at 10:30 sharp, never asked, always right on time. Or the way she left quotes scribbled on slips of paper beside his files. Oscar Wilde one day, Toni Morrison the next. Julian never mentioned them, but one morning she noticed one tucked into the corner of his wallet. 2 weeks passed, wrapped in paper-thin layers of quiet intimacy. Then came a Thursday night. Rain fell like a jazz melody from the sky. Beyond the glass of the 48th floor, the city blurred into strokes of light. Near 9 p.m., Elena was still sorting emails, jazz humming softly from the Bluetooth speaker. Julian hadn't left his office. She knew because she could still hear his typing, slower than usual, and because she'd started noticing he stayed late when something weighed on him. She stood, took the dinner she'd packed from earlier, grilled bread, salad, chicken soup, and approached his half-open door. You haven't eaten all day, she said, holding the bag. This isn't a suggestion, it's an intervention. Julian looked up, golden light brushing the tension in his features, surprised. You always come prepared? Elena. And yes, she replied, placing the meal down. There's tea too, no salt this time. He exhaled, nodded. So, this isn't just about tomorrow's agenda? She took the seat across from him. No, I came because someone had to care enough to remind you food matters. They ate in silence, but the kind that meant comfort, not awkwardness. Later, he said, I'm not used to this kind of attention. Real care doesn't come with an appointment, she replied. It just shows up when needed. Lights flickered. Outside, thunder rolled like drums. Emergency lights warmed the office in soft yellow glow. Elena looked out at the white sheets of rain. So did he. I like storms, she said. They remind me that even the best days aren't perfect. He didn't answer, but she saw him lean back in his chair, for the first time with someone in the room. Are you afraid of anything? She asked. Silence stretched. Then he answered, voice low and honest. Stopping. I'm afraid if I stop, I'll feel too much. She tilted her head. Feeling isn't failure, Julian. It's how we know we're alive. He looked at her, really looked, and his hand brushed lightly against her wrist. Just a second, but her heart forgot its rhythm. She didn't pull away, only said softly, I'm still here, even if you start to feel everything. There was no kiss, no declaration, but in that single moment of contact between two people who had spent their lives avoiding connection, something infinitely more powerful began. That morning, the 48th floor felt unusually busy. Staff were dressed sharper, the meeting schedule unusually packed, and there was a current in the air. Something was coming. Something bigger than manuscripts or business strategy. Elena sensed it the moment she stepped out of the elevator and saw Julian's assistant, Olivia, rearranging the hydrangeas at reception. For the first time, Olivia gave her a faint smile. Marlowe Group's team will be here by 10, she said while adjusting a pedal, and Isla's with them. Elena nodded, masking the flutter in her chest. She had heard the name, Isla Marlowe, several times in internal documents. CEO of a leading digital publishing firm, brilliant, ruthless, and, rumor had it, someone who once had a personal connection to Julian. All morning, Julian stayed in his office. When Elena brought his tea, as always, he nodded but didn't meet her eyes. The distance between them felt thin as silk, but sharp as glass. 10:05 a.m., heels clicked against the marble. Elena was in the break room when Isla entered, tall, brunette, red lips, and a walk that had never second-guessed itself. She glanced at Elena like reading a sentence, then turned away without a word. An hour later, Elena was summoned to the boardroom to take notes. She entered and sat quietly in the back. In front of her, Julian, Isla, and several executives. The tension in the room was tight as wire. The presentation began, graphs, projections, a proposed merger between Hale Capital and Marlowe Group. The goal? To create the largest independent publishing platform in North America. Then came the personal clause. Isla leaned back, arms crossed. Naturally, to solidify the merger structure, both boards agreed that a long-term commitment between the two CEOs is ideal. Smiles, nods. Helena froze. Isla continued. A marriage would unify not just resources, but branding and market trust. It's a symbol. Julian said nothing. He neither objected nor defended. He stared at some invisible point on the table. Elena bit the inside of her cheek. She didn't remember much else. Her hand still scribbled notes, but her heart shattered quietly. As the meeting ended, she stood to leave, but Isla blocked her. You're Elena, right? Sweet voice, sharp eyes. Yes. Julian doesn't let people in easily. You must be talented. Elena didn't reply. Isla stepped closer, whispering, This game is bigger than feelings, and Julian knows how to play his pieces. Elena left before Julian could say a word, left behind the tea, left behind the silence in his eyes. Chicago rained that afternoon. For the first time, Elena didn't like the sound. That night, she didn't open her emails. She didn't answer his texts. She lay in bed, replaying Aunt May's old voicemail. Real love doesn't come with promises. It comes with choices, when there's nothing holding them back but the heart. Elena closed her eyes. The ache wasn't just disappointment. It was betrayal in soft disguise. The next morning, Julian waited for her in the lobby. No suit, no tie, just a man, looking lost. You know, she said quietly. He nodded. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how to start. Then let me, she said gently. If I'm just a placeholder, take me out of the equation. Elena, it's not like that. Isn't it? She held his gaze. You knew this would come up. You sat there in silence like I didn't deserve to know. He swallowed. I thought if I refused the deal later, it wouldn't matter. But your silence did, she said, softer now. I didn't need you to pick me over your business. I needed you to be honest. He clenched his fists. Then what do you want? She took a breath, trembling slightly. I want you to know trust doesn't break with truth. It breaks with what you hide. And it only heals through action. She walked away, leaving Julian for the first time, not as a powerful man in control, but as someone suddenly, deeply alone. 3 days passed. No texts, no emails, no calls from Julian. Elena thought the silence would help her breathe easier, but it didn't. Silence, when it came from someone who had once entered your world with quiet grace, was the loneliest sound of all. She still came to Crescent House, still made tea at the same hour, still read through manuscripts like she was stitching back pieces of herself. The emptiness didn't come from Julian not choosing her. It came from him saying nothing at all, until Wednesday afternoon. The company's big presentation was held in an old hotel downtown. Elena had been assigned to logistics, testing microphones, checking lights, timing the sessions with precision. And then he appeared, Julian Hale, no suit. White shirt, open collar, holding the proposal for the independent publishing platform, the one they had built together between cups of tea and shared silences. People whispered. Isla sat in the front row, lips curled into a faint smirk. Julian stepped on stage. He didn't glance at Elena, but his voice, when it came, was steadier and truer than ever. I used to think success was something you could measure with numbers, assets, and power. He paused, drew in a breath. But in the past 3 days, I've learned there's another kind of success. The kind where you give up what's safe to hold on to what makes you feel like yourself. He looked directly at Elena for the first time in days. Today, I'm withdrawing from the merger with Marlowe Group, no matter the cost. He looked briefly at Isla. She raised an eyebrow, cool and unsurprised. Because if I lose the person who reminded me how to feel again, then what's left to win? Elena stood still, no movement. Barely breathing, Julian stepped off the stage, slowly and deliberately. He walked toward her through the rustling crowd. He didn't reach out. Didn't beg, he simply said, voice low but clear, I don't need you to choose me. I just need you to know I already chose you when no one told me I had to. Elena laughed, tears catching at the edge of her eyes. You do realize my tea is objectively weird, right? That's exactly why, he smiled gently. I never needed perfect. I only needed real. And she walked toward him, not because he was Julian Hale, but because, finally, beyond all his strategy, he had chosen the one thing that couldn't be calculated, the heart. The cafe sat quietly on the corner of 17th Street, where 2 calm roads met beneath rust-red maple trees. The corner chapter, a wooden sign hung by rough twine, its white handwritten letters a soft invitation for anyone still believing in simple things. Elena placed the ceramic teapot on the shelf, adjusting the lavender jar near the window. Outside, Chicago's autumn had settled in, leaves painting the sidewalks in gold and crimson. The air was filled with cinnamon, cookies, and slow-roasted coffee. At the back of the cafe, Julian tuned the old piano, rescued from a warehouse sale. He was no longer the cold CEO in sharp gray suits, but a quiet man, learning to live slower, smiling with his whole face. Elena watched him, her hand resting gently over her belly, where a quiet, growing life had begun, unfolding like a story not yet written. 1 year, just 1 year since she had walked out of that boardroom, her tears unshed, her heart undecided. 1 year since Julian left Hale Capital, sold his shares, and walked away from the things that once defined him to start over, with her, with himself. There had been no grand declarations, no diamond ring, no elaborate wedding, just a rainy afternoon, 2 signatures at City Hall, and a bottle of Aunt May's apple cider waiting at home in Asheville. Happiness, it turned out, didn't need an audience. The corner chapter wasn't just a coffee shop. It was where people came to finish stories that had been left behind. There were shelves to read from, paper and pens for those who needed to write, and soft music nights where Julian played the piano and Elena read her short stories aloud. On snowy days, they closed early just to walk together under falling flakes. On warm mornings, Julian biked out for fresh bread while Elena sat on the second-floor balcony, legs over the rail, writing the first lines of her new novel. Nothing was perfect. Sometimes the cafe was empty. Sometimes the tea was too weak. Sometimes Julian couldn't sleep, haunted by memories of a colder world. But Elena never left him alone with his weariness. She didn't try to erase his past. She simply helped him write what came next, slowly, honestly, with no pressure to make it flawless. At night, they turned off the lights early. Elena read while Julian sat on the floor, legs crossed, fingers wandering across piano keys as she shared her newest ideas. "I'm thinking of a female character," she said once, head on a pillow, hand over her stomach. "She's not strong in the usual way. She's strong in how she knows when to step back." Julian smiled. "Sounds like someone I know." Elena tilted her head, teasing. "Is that your type?" "No," he said, fingers pausing. "I don't have a type. I only have one love, and her I never chose. My heart did." Elena laughed, tears welling, not from sadness, but from the knowledge that a man who once doubted feelings now lived for them, daily. At night, in the quietest hours, Julian would lean down to kiss her belly and whisper what he'd never said aloud. "I'm sorry I used to be so cold, but your mom taught me how to be warm again." Elena heard him, even without opening her eyes. She reached for his hand, squeezed it gently, and left it there. And so, the day would end, not with fireworks, not with drama, but in a way so quiet and beautiful, it made you want to start life all over again, just to be loved like that. Outside the cafe, warm amber lights fell gently over sidewalks scattered with leaves. Julian sat on the floor, leaning against the sofa, eyes softly closed. Elena, hand over her belly, had drifted to sleep mid-page. There was no ending to the day, because sometimes the best endings require no goodbyes. The next morning, Julian woke earlier than usual. He didn't brew coffee like he normally would. Instead, he stepped into the backyard, where Elena had planted pots of mint and little white daisies. The wind brushed his collar, cool and quiet, but he didn't turn back. He opened an old notebook, the one he used to fill with investment targets, merger timelines, profitability charts. Now the last few pages had been taken over by Elena's handwriting, quotes, little reminders, and a list titled Things That Actually Matter. Julian flipped to the very end. On the last page, in soft blue ink, was a single line. "Legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's what stays quietly inside those you love long after you're gone." He read it again and again. And for the first time, he understood, truly understood, what Elena once meant when she said, "Not everyone wanted to reach the sky. Some just wanted to build a roof wide enough for someone to feel safe under when it rains." The day he met Elena, Julian believed everything had to be controlled, that love was vulnerability and gentleness was wasteful. But now, her softness had done what no billion-dollar deal ever could. It transformed him into a different kind of man, whole, compassionate, more human. And he didn't need the world to know that. He just needed her to know. He needed the child growing inside her to one day know that their father had once been lost, and their mother had been the light that brought him home. That evening, Julian returned to the living room to find Elena reading a letter from Aunt May. The lamp cast a golden glow, soft jazz played from the old radio, and the scent of cinnamon tea lingered in the air. Everything was ordinary, and yet so beautiful it ached. He sat beside her, saying nothing. Elena turned to him, rested her head on his shoulder, as she often did. And they sat like that, making no plans for tomorrow, not worrying if the cafe would be busy next year or if Elena's debut novel would sell, because the only thing they truly wanted to keep was each other. Simple, warm, like a story read in candlelight, quietly, slowly, until the last word feels like home.